After auditing hundreds of podcasts, we've noticed a common pattern. Most listeners decide whether or not to stay or leave your podcast episode within the first 90 seconds. And even worse, the very technique that new and experienced podcasters are using to sound more professional are actively driving listeners away. So today I'm revealing 3 seemingly innocent mistakes that are killing your podcast growth. Now, what should you even care? Who cares if your intro is good, if it's captivating, or if it's engaging? Well, simply put, if you don't have a solid intro that convinces a total stranger to stick around and listen, it means that you might get the perfect listener who discovers your show, who, by the way, would be perfect for the message you're trying to share. But if you don't show them and give them enough reason to actually stick around and listen to the podcast episode, all of that work is for nothing. And it literally could be someone who's famous. It could even be an industry titan who has a massive show, like getting millions of downloads per month, who's currently scouting smaller podcasts, looking for different hosts that they want to invite onto their show. Now, let's say they discover your podcast, and within the first 90 seconds, they're not convinced as to why they should stick around and listen. But let's say the episode itself was super valuable, like they would have loved it. But because that intro didn't sell the listen, that authority figure now thinks of your show as something less. They skip over it, go to the next show who does have a much stronger intro. They binge their content and then invite them onto their show. That's an opportunity that you've just lost because you didn't have a strong intro. Number 2, let's say, for example, you're working super hard and you've been publishing new podcast episodes for, let's say, years, right? Most of our clients that we work with, they've been at it for 2-3 years, some even 4. Let's say you're in that same spot and you're promoting on social media. If your intros aren't strong enough and you do all this crazy promotion and you convince someone to click play to the episode, but then again, they don't consume the content, why are you spending all this time, effort, and energy producing the podcast for people not to listen to it? Without a strong intro, you're capping your show's growth. If you think about it, you need 3 things in place in order to grow a podcast. Number 1, you have to get exposure in your podcast. Number 2, you have to convince that person to actually click play and listen. And then number 3, in order to grow your show and grow your audience, you have to convince more of those listeners to keep coming back for more. But where things get tricky is if your intro isn't strong enough and a new listener finally discovers your show and then you lose them within 90 seconds, how the hell are you going to convince them to keep coming back for more? Can you see how this would affect the growth of your show? Now, that just focused on the growth side, and it's not even talking about the opportunity that you eventually lose out on when it comes to driving sales for your business. Let's have a business, maybe a newsletter, maybe a specific action you want your audience to take. Again, a lot of our clients, they have coaching programs, courses, online communities, and they're using the podcast to, of course, build awareness, make impact, get their message out there, but in hopes that at the end of an episode, they'll extend their hand and invite the listener into their world, either by joining their newsletter, buying a course, joining their program, or working with them on a one-on-one basis. If your intros aren't strong enough and people don't get through the first 90 seconds, they'll never, 1, build the like, know, and trust to want to buy from you in the first place. But even more obvious is that if they don't get past the first 90 seconds, they just wouldn't hear the CTA. They won't even hear the offer, which might be perfect for them. And that's all because your intro wasn't captivating or engaging enough. I hope I've convinced you and shown you why this is way more important than you think and why you should even care about this in the first place. So without further ado, what are these mistakes that we've found and noticed amongst hundreds of podcasters, both new and experienced, that's killing their podcast growth and their show's ability to monetize? Mistake number 1. Look, imagine you go to a movie theater and you're buzzing, right? The title is just captivating, it's beautiful, right? And you sit down and let's say the first 5 minutes starts off by the director of the movie coming on stage, giving you a deep dive backstory about where he came from, who his mum is, what credentials he has, his whole entire story about how he got into movies and how he moved to LA in 2009. You'd be so confused, right? You'd be like, I want my money back. Give me the bloody movie. What the hell is this all about? I don't care. This is great, but I don't really care. But look, this is exactly what happens when so many business owners and experts start their podcast off by introducing guests and having like long bios and long intros that are way too drawn out and talk about PhD this and PhD that, trying to build up the credential for the guest before they get into it. Now, I understand this thinking. It makes logical sense why you'd want to do this. But I hope you can see how by just focusing solely on the guest to begin with, you put off people who just came because they saw the value of the title. When they're kind of thinking like, okay, cool, this is great, the guest has done this and done that. But like, why the hell should I bloody care? So that's mistake number one. Having intros that are way too guest focused. We had a client who was making this exact same mistake. She came to us, her show just wasn't growing, and we reviewed her retention time, meaning like, on average, how much of a podcast do her listeners actually consume? And there's a graph you can see on Apple Podcast Connect. Now, what we found was interesting. We found that within that first 90 seconds, she was losing 40% of her audience. And it's because she had these long, boring resume type intros that didn't really tell the listeners why they should care about the episode. It just gave a backstory about the guest. So we fixed this, and we decided to start the intro by focusing on the value the listeners will gain, by hooking the listeners, by getting them to lean in and showing them why they couldn't afford not to listen. And once we made these changes, within 90 days, her show started to move in the right direction because more of the listeners stuck around for the episode, consumed her content, got the value, enjoyed it, and then went through her back catalogue to listen to some more episodes. And when future episodes came out, they were far more likely to click play and listen. Now on to mistake number two. Imagine you're in that same cinema and you're watching this movie. You've had this long ass bio of the director, which you didn't really care about having. And the next thing that pops up is a bunch of calls to action. And he's like, oh, by the way, if you enjoy this movie, follow me on Instagram. Oh, by the way, I've got this website. Be sure to check that out. Oh, and by the way, if you do like this, leave us a 5-star review. Oh, and by the way, I have this program coming up in case you want to become a movie star. And you sit there and you think to yourself, what the bloody hell is actually going on here? Like, who is this person? Why am I getting pitched to? You'll probably get pissed off, stand up and walk off and just not watch the rest of the movie. But the question is why? Well, it's simple. Number one, is way too early and they're asking you to do a bunch of different stuff. Number two, you haven't even watched the movie yet, which is what you came for, and you're being asked to do like 5 different things. Number 5, it's overwhelming. Like, there's just too many things that this person is trying to get you to do. You showed up to the movie because you liked the title, you liked the trailer, it seemed good. Now, at the end of the movie, if the movie was good, you'd be open to leaving the review, maybe going to his website, sharing your thoughts on social media. And you're definitely not going to do all 5 right at the start of the movie when you haven't even watched the movie. You don't know, like, or even think the movie is good in the first place, right? But that same mistake is exactly what happens when you overload your intros with a bunch of CTAs. And this is something that we see time and time again with shows that we audit. They have maybe something coming up and they decide, oh, is the start of the intro, people are always going to hear this part, so let me just shower them with a bunch of CTAs. But again, people haven't built a like, know, and trust yet. They haven't even received the value. So it puts them off and they just skip the episode and just find another one that provides them that value a lot faster. So mistake number 2 is just overloading your intros with too many CTAs and asking way too much from your audience way too early. So remember, people came for your content first. Deliver on the content, then ask later. Don't stuff your intros with a bunch of CTAs. That's just going to put off the right listeners who would have thoroughly enjoyed your content. And then finally, mistake number 3. The best way to kind of illustrate this is by sharing a little story. Now, some of you might have heard of the famous artist Picasso. He was known as a master of his time. Ever since he was a teenager, he would create beautiful masterpieces and redefine what art actually meant. There's a famous story where he was sitting there chilling at a cafe. I don't know if he was drinking coffee or cappuccinos. I'm not too sure. Anyways, he was at this cafe and he was drawing on a napkin. Now, someone on the street recognized him and saw he was drawing on this napkin. So they thought to themselves, wow, this is a great opportunity for me to go over and actually make a purchase from Picasso. So he walks up to Picasso and asks him the very simple question. Hey, I would love to buy the drawing on this napkin. I'll give you $100 for it. And Picasso looks up at him and just smiles and goes, no, that'll be $5,000. And the guy kind of looks at him, says and goes, dude, what the hell, $5,000? I've just seen you. It took you like less than 3 minutes. Why the hell would I pay $5,000 for a napkin? It didn't quite make sense to him. And Picasso looks at him, smiles, and says, "What you're looking at didn't take me 3 minutes. It took me 40 years to master." And I think right there kind of shows you the importance of framing. This guy just saw this artist and he saw him take 3 minutes to draw something. And it did take 3 minutes, right? And in his mind, he thinks he's valuing it at, well, they just spent 3 minutes doing that. Whereas Picasso was able to reframe this as, no, that's taken me 40 years. That gives the napkin a totally different meaning. It gives the napkin so much more value. The perceived value of it goes up to like that. So mistake number 3 is this. So many podcasters have spent years getting good at providing incredible value, getting very good at interviewing incredible guests, getting very good at producing high quality shows. The likelihood is you probably have an awesome podcast. I'm confident you have an awesome podcast. When we help clients grow, the issue is never that like their podcast sucks and they're terrible for the most part, right? That's not really the issue. The issue for the most part is they struggle with how to frame their podcast in the most attractive way that communicates the value, that increases the perceived value of their show and convinces someone why they should invest time to listen to their podcast. And that exact same mistake is what we see when it comes to podcast intros. When your intros don't frame the value in a unique way, you don't convince and show people why they should listen, so they just diminish the value and they go somewhere else. So I think what might be important, you might be thinking, and that sounds great, mate, that sounds fantastic, but like, give me some examples of bad framing versus good framing. Here are some examples. Today we have Sarah, and we're going to talk about some LinkedIn ads around how to run ad campaigns. Now, compare that to, today we have Sarah, who's managed over $50 million in LinkedIn ad spend for B2B and SaaS businesses. Today, she's sharing her copywriting secret formula that's generated her a 400% ROI in as little as 90 days. Again, a clear night and day difference. Another one might be, hey guys, today I'm going to talk about burnout. Let's get into it. Versus, have you ever hit a point where your to-do list is full, your bank account is empty, and you're stuck working a 60-hour work week with no end in sight? Have you fell out of love for the work you used to do and now find yourself procrastinating work that was once easy? Today, I'm going to show you the exact burnout blueprint that I used to rebuild my business and drive way more revenue in 90 days. Can you see how both of those examples, one is very nonchalant, feels kind of lazy in a way, right? Whereas the other one is telling you exactly why you should listen, is building enough interest and enough desire for you to want to lean in and find out more about the show. You've done all this work to produce this incredible podcast, this amazing show. You've maybe spent time to find the right guests for your podcast. Maybe they have a high profile. Or you spend time creating your solo podcast content strategy if you're focused on solo shows. You hit record, produce this super high value content. You go through the effort of promoting it on social media. Now, a new listener or old listener discovers it either on social media or maybe they just find it browsing on Apple and Spotify, the mainstream platforms people are on. They land on your show out of thousands because your episode title stuck out to them. You've gone through all of that effort. You've got them up to this point. They then click play only for them to bail, all because you made the silly mistakes of being way too guest focused, giving them way too many CTAs when they haven't built the like, know, and trust yet. Just because the framing of the episode didn't show them and give them a reason why they should care in the first place. That's dozens of tiny little decisions, hours spent on the show, all wasted because of these mistakes. So for the love of God, please, I beg, avoid these mistakes. Follow the principles I've outlined of what makes a good intro. And watch as your show finally starts to move in the right direction, as the engagement of your audience starts to increase and sales start to roll in. Now with that being said, I'll catch you in the next video. Peace.